Ever wondered why some relationships feel so much more intense than others, even when they aren't actually good for you? It's a pattern most people completely miss until it's far too late, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Welcome back to Alpha Rebuild. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here. If you're finding this helpful already, go ahead and smash that like button. This shift is vital because it allows you to finally separate high voltage emotional intensity from actual emotional truth. Most people get age gap attraction totally wrong. They think the strongest feelings come from being similar, but the truth is that they often come from pure contrast. That contrast is like an emotional magnet because it completely challenges your internal expectations of how a connection is supposed to feel. When someone much older or much younger enters your personal space, they disrupt your usual relationship patterns. Your mind interprets this sudden shakeup as something deeply meaningful. But here is the catch. Disruption is not the same thing as compatibility. In reality, your brain often confuses an emotional jolt with emotional importance. This happens because the shock of the difference triggers higher attention and better memory. Because of this, you remember every conversation more vividly, every moment feels heavier, and the emotional peaks seem clearer than they ever would in a standard, balanced relationship. What you are remembering isn't necessarily the truth of the connection. It is just a neurological spike in your system. But here's the crazy part about the stories we tell ourselves. People start building entire life narratives about someone based solely on how intense their feelings are, rather than looking at how consistently they are being treated. You have to understand the emotional asymmetry in these age gap dynamics. Usually, one person feels like they are learning and growing, while the other feels like they are rediscovering something from their past. This creates an uneven exchange of energy, even if both people are genuinely interested in each other. When one person feels like they are being introduced to a whole new world and the other feels like they are being reminded of something they lost or forgot, the relationship starts to revolve around two very different sets of psychological needs. You might feel like this person understands you in a way nobody else does, but sometimes they don't actually see you. They see the version of you that fits into their own internal story of how a relationship should feel. That distinction is small, but it is absolutely crucial. Feeling understood feels exactly like being loved, even when that understanding is totally incomplete or selective. Now, this is where it gets really interesting when we look at how habits form. Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss our next video. Over time, this dynamic creates a powerful emotional dependency. This doesn't always happen because of intentional manipulation. It happens through simple cycles of reinforcement. Your brain begins to associate this specific person with your own emotional awakening, your validation, or the expansion of your identity. That association gets stronger every single time there is a burst of intensity, followed by a moment of relief or reconnection. But you have to remember that healthy emotional bonds are not built on these cycles of intensity. Real bonds are built on stability, mutual clarity, and a constant, steady emotional presence. When those things are missing, your nervous system tries to fill the void. It increases your emotional investment just to compensate for the lack of predictability. You might feel like you're falling into a deeper love, but it's actually just your brain trying to stabilize uncertainty through attachment. The more you try to figure it out, the more involved you get, unless you learn to step back and see what is actually being traded. Which part of this has surprised you the most so far? Drop a comment below and let me know. Now, I want you to consider something most people avoid thinking about because it completely eliminates the fantasy and forces actual responsibility back into the equation. Wait until you hear this. When it comes to age gap attraction, it's almost always about timing. I'm not just talking about emotional timing, but where you actually are in your life journey. This is exactly where so many relationships start to struggle in silence. Even when the feelings are 100% real and you genuinely care for each other, you might be totally out of sync when it comes to your goals, your stability, or your priorities. Think about it. If one person is still building their identity and career while the other is in a completely different phase of life, the relationship starts to feel an invisible pressure. It's a weight that no amount of chemistry or spark can ever truly fix on its own. Now, your mind might want to resist this idea because it feels like I'm asking you to doubt something meaningful. But listen, questioning your situation isn't the same as rejecting it. It's about getting clarity, and that clarity is the only thing that's going to protect you from a lot of emotional confusion down the road. But here's the crazy part. Over time, what usually happens is that both people start changing who they are just to keep the connection alive, and they don't even realize the price they're paying. You might start making your own needs feel small or ignoring that nagging off feeling because the emotional high feels so good. But you have to realize that adapting to someone isn't the same as being aligned with them. Sometimes you aren't actually growing together, you're just bending yourself into a shape that fits the other person. That difference becomes a massive issue later on because adaptation takes constant effort, while true alignment just feels natural. By the way, if you're finding this helpful, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next video. We're diving deep into the stuff most people are too afraid to say out loud. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. There's another psychological layer at play here, and it's called future projection. When emotions are this intense, we tend to fall in love with what the relationship could be instead of what it actually is right now. An age gap makes this even stronger because the difference itself invites your imagination to fill in the blanks. You start dreaming about future scenarios, deep conversations, and a whole life together. But those visions are built on potential, not on the reality of today. Potential is one of the most dangerous traps in any relationship because it makes you feel like you're halfway there, even when you aren't. The more you invest in that imaginary future, the harder it becomes to look at your compatibility objectively. You might find yourself making excuses for things that don't add up or ignoring your own worries just to protect that dream you've already latched onto. But here's the truth. Real emotional maturity means separating how you feel from how that person actually shows up for you every day. You have to look at the patterns of behavior, not just the moments of intensity. When you stop looking at what could be and start looking at what is, you get a superpower. You finally see if you're building something solid or if you're just caught in an emotional loop that won't survive in the real world. Now, I want you to listen closely to this because this is where awareness will either set you free or keep you stuck. Attraction across an age gap isn't automatically wrong, and it's not automatically right. It's not about the age difference itself. What actually matters is the emotional foundation that's holding the whole thing up. Think about whether both of you are showing up as equals in terms of respect and emotional work, or if one of you is carrying the whole load without even realizing it. If you're finding this helpful so far, smash that like button. When feelings get intense, your brain will try to justify everything. It starts telling you stories, replaying the highlights while ignoring the messy parts. That's just what attachment does. It tries to protect the bond, even if that bond is totally unstable. But here's the thing. You aren't just your attachment response. You are the person watching it happen. When you learn to observe instead of just reacting, you start taking back control over your own peace. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The most important question you can ask yourself isn't how do I feel, but how do I feel consistently over time? Do you feel safe or insecure? Are you steady or always upset? Is there clarity or just confusion? See, clarity is rarely messy, and confusion is almost never an accident. Usually, it's a sign that your timing, expectations, or emotional availability just aren't lined up. If someone actually fits into your life in a healthy way, you won't feel like you're constantly trying to crack a secret code. You'll just feel understood without having to overthink every single interaction. If you're in this spot, I'm not saying you have to leave or stay. I'm just saying you should slow down enough to see what's actually happening behind all that intensity. Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Intensity can feel like deep meaning, but real meaning is built on consistency, not just emotional peaks. If this connection is real, it will survive you finding your clarity. It won't ask you to ignore your gut feelings or your own stability just to keep it alive. If it does, then what you're feeling isn't love in its purest form. It's an emotional mess made of bad timing and projection. You deserve to know the difference, because once you do, you'll never mistake chaos for a real connection again. Which part of this hit home for you? Drop a comment and share this with someone who needs it.